drugs and alcohol didn't hold up their end of the deal, right? They were supposed to forever make me feel better and make me comfortable in my own skin. And they stopped doing that.
Hey guys, welcome back to Stuff God Never Said. I'm your host, Audrey Cauthen, and with me today is my good buddy, Derek, who just has a story to tell for sure. And he has a really awesome, redemptive situation going on. So welcome, Derek.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Tell us about yourself.
Wow, there's so much to tell. I'm 48 years old. I did not grow up in the church, but I grew up believing in God. My parents instilled that in us, but we did not grow up going to church or reading the Bible together every night or anything like that. Yeah. And it led to a lot of interesting things. I started at a young age. I started looking to music to save me, and I was looking to, the music I heard on the radio. Back in the day, if you're a younger person, we used to listen to music on the radio and then have to put a tape in and press record to be able to hear that song again. And then you'd call into the radio station to have them play the song that you wanted to hear. So as a young kid, 10, 11 years old, I'm listening to these songs on the radio, and I'm listening to love songs. Yeah. And they're kind of teaching me like, oh my God, I have so many feelings, right? Yeah. I have all these feelings that I don't know what to do with. And I'm in love with this girl, and I'm 11, right? And
I'm song told me so.
It told me, there'll be sad songs that make you cry. Yeah. And I would listen to these, and I would lay in my room and I would cry, and I would I was very emotional. I felt very deeply as a child. And then I was uncomfortable. I was an uncomfortable kid. I would go to, I'd go to parties. I never felt like I fit in. I never felt like anybody. I had a lot of anxiety. I felt like everybody was judging me. I cared what everyone thought. I never felt like I was a good looking kid. I always wanted to, God, why can't I just look like my friend? Why can't my hair be straight? Why can't I? It was all the things that I always looked at all the things that I didn't have, not all the things that I had. And I had a good life. I mean, my parents were amazing. I grew up in Newport Beach, California, and lived on Balboa Island and went surfing every day, and had an amazing life that I just didn't appreciate at all at that time. And around 10 or 11 years old, I started experimenting with drugs and alcohol.
10 or 11.
And I thought that was, all of a sudden it gave me, false confidence, right? All of a sudden it curbed something in me, some anxiety, some uncomfortableness, that all of a sudden I felt comfortable. And I was able to meet friends, and I was able to talk to girls, and I was able to do all these things that I couldn't do. And music was still a huge part of my life. Yeah. And, I was working at a grocery store and realizing that you can't do a lot of drugs and work at the grocery store and stay employed. And so
I'm guessing you learned that the hard way.
I did learn that the hard way. They saw me go to rehab when I was 17 years old, but I had a job at this club, and I was setting up gear for punk bands at this club. Nice. So Blink would come play, and the Vandals, and all of these bands. And I was I loved the club, and I was like, oh, well, I can drink and use drugs like I want to in this world, because this is rock and roll. Yeah. This is cool. This is
built for it.
And so I started doing that. And at 18 years old, a band called The Vandals was like, hey, we want you to go on tour with us. And I was like, cool, awesome. This is great. And so I went on tour and was able to drink. They had everything in the dressing room. They had tons of beer in the dressing room. And I was just, they had a nickname for me, and they called me Puppety, because I literally got so drunk every night that it was like, I was just stumbling and kind of a mess. And
it's so sad.
And they didn't know this, but when I would come home, I had a really bad drug addiction. And so I was an intravenous drug user. And I would come home, and I had a heroin addiction, and I would go on the tour, and I would kick before every tour. So I would kick heroin before every tour, and then go on tour, and then I wouldn't use it all tour for a month. And then I would come back, and then I would use again. And then I would go into this deep, depression from not being out on the road, which I thought was so fulfilling. You know, oh, it's so cool. I'm out here, I'm traveling, and I don't have to deal with any of the headaches of home.
Yeah.
And so I was escaping.
Yeah.
And then I got the job with Blink, and that was right when I kind of quit using heroin. I had someone come to me and they're like, hey, if you want to do this for a living, I was 20 years old. I think I was 20, it was 96. And he goes, if you want to do this for a living, he goes, you're going to have to get sober. And I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah.
And so I quit using heroin, and I went on the road, and I still drank, partied, had fun. And I was like, this is what normal people do. In my household, we went to family parties and everyone drank and had a good time.
Yeah.
They were partying and smoking weed and doing whatever they were doing. And that was okay. But obviously heroin was too far.
Yeah.
Right. So I toured for a long time, and I had, just like everybody's life, I had ups and downs, and it was never a thing to me that drugs and alcohol were the issue. It was always like, well, you just do those. And I could never have a strong relationship with another person and have a good job at the same time. So I had to pick between one or the other, and I could never figure out what that was. And what I realized is that I always had my addiction in the background. And so I could only do two things. And I had to choose, because I would never not choose my addiction.
Yeah.
And I had to choose between relationships or a job.
Yeah.
So when my job was going great, my relationship was failing. And when my job was going terrible, my relationships were great. It was very awkward. I toured for a long time and ended up being very successful at it.
Yeah.
And working for a lot of big bands and doing a lot of big things and doing a lot of drugs with a lot of big people.
Yeah.
and then I got into pills because I thought those were like prescribed by a doctor. So they're obviously,
so they're safe.
They're totally way better for you.
It's super safe. Pfizer made
makes sense. And if you drink a little bit with them, it really kicks them in. So
great.
I thought that would be the solution for me. Is, painkillers but you're taking so many painkillers that you can't go to sleep. So you got to take something to go to sleep. And so you start taking, Valium and Xanax and things like that to help you go to sleep. And next thing I knew, I was 40 something, 41 years old. And I couldn't stop. Like, I felt so awful. And so, I woke up one day in December in 2017, and I called my mom and I said, everybody knew. I didn't think anybody knew.
Yeah.
Everybody knew.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like when you're going through it, you're like, nobody knows. I'm totally playing this off.
Yeah.
Right? I'm totally playing this off. Nobody knows.
Yeah.
Everybody knows. And I called my mom and I said, I took my last pill last night. I am done. I'm not going to do this again. And she'd seen me get sober several times. So she was like, okay, honey.
Yeah.
And I said, it was December 16th. And I said, by Christmas time, I will see you guys at Christmas at my sister's house, and I will be sober. I said, I've done this before. I quit doing heroin. I can quit doing anything. And I ended up in a mental institution for just having crazy hallucinations and thinking people were trying to kill me and calling the cops on myself and all of this stuff. And my sister really helped me through it. And I got sober, and it was January, and I'd had like a few weeks, and my sister goes, you should go to this thing called Celebrate Recovery with me. And I go, cool. So I went to it, and they're just in there just talking about Jesus and all of this. And they're talking about their sexual addiction, and they're talking about all of their other sort of addictions. And I'm like, I don't get this. This is ridiculous. I shouldn't be here. What is going on? And I had this big resentment. I remember they gave me the recovery Bible from Celebrate Recovery, and I went through and I crossed out Jesus through the whole entire thing. Because I was like, this is ridiculous, right? This isn't, how is this keeping me sober? This is dumb. And
oh man.
And I joined another support group with a friend of mine that I had known for 30 years who happened to get sober. And I went to it, and what I found going through this was that I had a spiritual malady. And until I could figure out my relationship with God, I wasn't going to be able to stay sober. I could get sober. I could get a month. I'd get 2 months. But until I could figure out that relationship, I think sometimes they say I had a God-sized hole and I was filling it with drugs and alcohol instead of filling it with the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And that's truly what was happening. And I continued to go to both programs. I continued to go to Celebrate Recovery, and I continued to go to my other program, which I still do today. I don't know what happened. It was this very weird, like, people say that, like, you know, God brought me into these programs, into recovery, and then recovery turned around and pushed me right back to God, because that's what it's supposed to be. And the whole thing was finding this way with Jesus. For me, was like, they told me in the program, they're like, you just need to find a God of your own understanding. And I said, well, that's easy. I've had it the whole time. The whole time I was growing up, I knew that Jesus was my Lord and Savior. And I had just never said it. I had never really studied it. I'd never understood it. I've never had didn't really have the desire. I was looking to false idols. I was looking to rock stars and these people, and comparing myself to them and trying to be more like them.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm watching them die of drug overdoses here and there and all of these things. And I'm like, I don't want to end up like this. What do I need to do? And you know, and I'm praying to God, like, God, what do I need to do? I don't want to be like this anymore. And he had a solution, but it's never an easy one.
Yeah.
It's not like, you know, what I wanted was the hand on the head, you're healed.
Yes.
And that's not what it is. It's not a hand on the head, you're healed. It's a this is going to be really hard. And, you know, I learned from going through the Bible that Jesus never said it was easy to follow him in anything that he said.
Yeah.
He always said that this will be difficult. And every one of his disciples was tortured and murdered. Right. Like, that's just what it was.
Yeah. And it's like, it's always a risk.
Always.
A risk of, are you going to do it? And are you going to trust me?
Yes.
And it sounds like even what you're saying is, and it feels like every person who's been on this show so far had the same point at some point in their story where they're like, I thought I loved Jesus, or I thought I knew Jesus, but I didn't really love Jesus. But I don't think it's that you didn't really love Jesus. I think it's that you didn't know the real Jesus to love, because you hadn't given him that opportunity yet. You hadn't said yes to the risk of allowing yourself to feel a God-sized hole.
Totally.
And whatever that looks like. But I mean, it's just so, it's so, I mean, even Moses is like, dude, why are you asking me to do this big thing? I'm like some kind of orphan dude who like has half one foot in both camps. Like, what do you want from me? Like, I'm not fit. And he's like, yes, you're not. His solution wasn't, let me tell you why you're so fit for this. Yeah. It was, I'm with you. I am with you. That's why you can do this. That's why you can take the risky step to become sober and give up the drugs for real this time. Because that is, I mean, I can't, of all the risks I've taken in life, drugs has not been one of them.
That's good. That's a good thing.
But I have watched many family members and friends battle that. And I can't imagine the courage it takes to say, like, I'm done with the one thing that I've believed has sustained me my whole life.
It's definitely I wish it was like, I'm so great, it's so courageous, but it was truly a surrender. Is drugs and alcohol didn't hold up their end of the deal. Right. They were supposed to forever make me feel better and make me comfortable in my own skin. And they stopped doing that. And, you know, I'm still new to Christianity, generally speaking. I mean, I was baptized in 2018, and it was a really emotional, big moment for me. My whole family was there. And I think that what I've learned is that God never fails, right? Jesus will never fail you, like all of the things this world that do.
Yeah.
And so if you look I call it the hierarchy of life. If I put my family as the number one thing in my life, they will never live up to that.
Mm-hmm.
If I put my job as the number one thing in my life, it will never live up to that. But if I put Jesus as the number one thing in my life and then let everything else fall down below that, then he will always protect everything that's there.
Yeah. That's so good.
So it's, every day I don't do it perfect.
Yeah.
Like everyone else.
Who does? Literally no one ever. Except Jesus.
But it's been interesting, and looking back on all the things I've been through, I realized that he was there all along, right? Because of all the things I've been through in my life, of all the times I've struggled, and he's figured it out. I think I see it now, whereas I didn't see it then. I don't know. I have this saying, and I don't know if it really makes any sense at all, but a lot of people said that the devil's greatest trick is making him think he didn't exist, right? Like that's everyone's. Yeah. That's everyone's thing that they say. And I was like, I think the devil's greatest trick is that he lets your will work. Oh, and it's really, really awful because my will will fail 1,000 times, but it'll work a couple times because it just does. Yeah. And I will lean on those 2 times like my life depends on it. I'll be like, well, that one time totally worked out. And that was just all me. It was all me. Right. Yeah. And I find myself leaning on that. So, the big thing is every day I wake up and I pray that I can turn my life and my will over to the care of God that day. And because it's a daily reprieve, it's not something you can just be like, oh, well, I prayed it once when I was 13. And so I guess it'll be that way forever. Yeah. It's a daily thing because we constantly want to feel like we have control of things. Yeah. And we don't. We just don't. We don't have control over so much. We don't have control over other people. Yeah. And I want control over other people. I constantly go, God, if these people would just do what I said. Says the band manager. Exactly. And I don't. And as a band manager, I've had to being a Christian and learning this way has helped me huge. Yeah. Because now I know everything's going to work out exactly the way it's supposed to work out. Yeah. And that doesn't mean it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean it's going to be great. Yeah. But my perception of the way things should be are making me unhappy. Yeah. So if I can just go, hey, you know what? I trust you so much with everything. I trust you with my life. I trust you with every decision. Tell me which step I need to take next and I will take it. That's so good. And so I try to do that in every decision. And there's a thing I live by called the 3 Ps. And it's pause, pray, and proceed. Because a lot of times we make these decisions that are in haste or in anger. Yeah. And they're quickly made. And most of our quickly made decisions is our will. Yeah. It's like, well, this is what I want to happen. So this is what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. This is what I'm going to tell this person because this is the response I want from them. Or it's how I feel. It's how I feel. They need to know how I feel. They need to know exactly how I feel right now. And if you just pause a minute. Yeah. And just take a minute and pray. And in everything, in personal relationships and business decisions, a lot of times people will be like, we got to solve this problem right now. And I go, no, we don't need to solve this problem. Yeah. Right now. We need to wait. And I pray on it and I pray with them and we wait and we see, and the time to move will present itself. Mm-hmm. So it's just interesting to work in that world where everything before was, this is my will, this is how it's going to go. And if it doesn't go this way, I'm going to be very resentful against all of you. Yeah. Yeah. That's a lot of resentment for you to live with every day. It's a lot of resentment to live with. That's not fair to you. No. Well, it's not fair to anybody. Yeah. For me, it's not fair for me to resent them. I mean, I have forgiven people who have no idea they've done anything to me. Yeah. Because I have to. Because I can't live with resentments. Yeah. Yeah. That's so good. You said something that I want to circle back to. Mm-hmm. You said when you went to Celebrate Recovery, you read the Bible, but you crossed out the Jesus.
have a lot of things I want to ask about that, but the hostility towards Jesus, where do you think that came from? Because I feel like we live in a world where people aren't mad at other gods. They're not mad. The world's not mad at Buddha. No one's mad at Muhammad, but you bring up Jesus and it triggers hurt people.
Well, so I've always had people trying to like send me scripture and text messages and every day sending me their morning pray thing. And I'm like, stop.
Yeah.
Like, just stop. And even when I first got sober, my brother would he would send me every morning like a different scripture. Right. and my sister went to him and she goes, dude, you need to stop. This is having the reverse effect that you want it to have.
Yeah.
And I see it now. Like I see it in the church. Is like, there's some people out there that are very like, I'm going to cram Jesus down their throat. And I'm just not that way.
Yeah.
I needed to find my own relationship with Jesus, and I needed it to come in his timing, not somebody else's telling me, because I needed to learn about it. I needed to understand it. And when I started reading, I remember reading through Matthew and just crying like the whole time of all these things that were happening. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, and I'd never read it from that perspective before.
Yeah.
And then reading through the other stories and seeing them all match up, but in their own way, and being like, oh my goodness, like this is who I'm following. And I think for me, it was people. I blamed Jesus for the people that followed Jesus. Right. Because I'm like, well, they aren't perfect. And they're constant, like, give me a break, Bob over here, cheated on his wife. How's that guy following Jesus? And I'm basically like judging all of them because I have no desire to take a look at myself.
Yeah.
And it's easier to judge other people. Way easier.
Yeah.
It's really hard to take a look at yourself and who you are and what you're doing in life.
Yeah. But I think that's one of the things that makes you and your wife, Megan, like both of your stories so powerful, is that you guys are so authentic in your love for Jesus and your love for people, because someone who's been forgiven much loves much.
Right.
And you're like, I have nothing to hide and I'm never going to be perfect. And that's the point. Like, I'm never going to be perfect. And I think people have really good intentions to love people in brokenness and have no idea how to do it. And they're like, scripture, here's another scripture that you don't understand the context to or anything, but here you go.
Right.
When maybe what we should do is like sit down with you and like let you, where you were then. I don't know that I would want to do this with you now, but where you were then, just like let you rage and cuss and let you not feel judged and be like, dude, it's hard. I hear you. I see you. I love you.
I love the phrase, attraction rather than promotion. Jesus doesn't need me to promote him. Right. He doesn't need me to go out and create big billboards and banners that say, follow Jesus.
Or burn in hell.
Right. It doesn't, I don't need
that gets
those.
The job done.
That gets the job done. Let's threaten them. Instead, I think the greatest thing for me was that I heard people's stories. Like, let me hear, like when I read through and I read Matthew, what I read was someone's stories. Right?
Yeah.
I read the stories of what Jesus did for these people. And I'm like, that's so powerful. Isn't this what Christians should be doing?
Yeah.
Instead of me trying to be, oh, well, I'm sober and I'm Christian now, so I'm going to go ahead and read a bunch of stuff from the Bible that I just learned and try to tell you how all of this relates to your life. Instead of that, maybe the best thing we can be as Christians is to be incredibly vulnerable.
Yeah.
Because that's what he's called us to do.
Yeah. And there's so many stories. I think of the bleeding woman who grabbed his cloak, got Jesus's cloak. Like, I think her picture of faith is so good because there were so many times throughout mine and Cody's walk through infertility and miscarriage and loss and all that stuff was like, oh, is my faith not good enough? Am I like, I associated faith and happiness. Like, can I walk through this with a smile on my face? If I can, then my faith is good.
Right.
If I can't, my faith is bad. And if I have bad faith, then I'm not going to get what I want. Like this very like structured, this is how it works, which is so untrue. And I remember, and again, like you, it wasn't anyone preaching at me. It was just me reading this story of this woman who's so desperate. She's crawling on the ground, probably through like people's feces and stuff. Cause it was back then, like she's so freaking desperate. Like, and her faith, it was like her last ditch effort to just try to touch him.
Just to touch him.
Just, if I can just touch something he's wearing, maybe that will do the trick. Like, I don't think it was this like, oh, I'm going to go touch Jesus and I'm ready. Like, okay. No, dude. Like she was so freaking desperate. She was like, I'll try this. I'm just going to try it. I have nothing left to do but to try this. And she did. And he was like, your faith, that level of faith, like from the disgusting ground, that's the faith that's going to heal you, of not, saying the right thing, using the right scripture, keeping a smile on your face, preaching the right words. Like, no, you're so desperate that like, I'm going to meet you where you are. And that's where it's going to be. And like that gross picture of faith to me was like, oh, I've been serving the wrong Jesus. I've been like using the wrong game plan for this. Like, it's not, I really thought my sadness was a picture of me not trusting him.
Right.
Okay. So you're on the road, living your best life.
Yeah.
Which is actually secretly not your best life, but feels like it for a little bit.
Yeah.
Were there ever like Jesus encounters that made you second guess your choices?
I mean, yeah, there was a few. Well, so first of all, going out on the road and working for bands and doing this was like, I always wanted to be in a band, but this was like the second best thing. So this is the life that I built, right? I built my dream life, and my dream life is traveling around the world with these bands and doing this stuff. And what I'm finding, and this is a huge bummer, is that I'm not happy. I'm not happy doing this. Yeah. And I'm out there and I'm traveling around and I'm like, I'm lonely and I'm resentful. I'm resentful that I'm not the one playing on stage. I always want more. I'm like, oh, well, I'm the stage manager of this giant band, but why am I not the tour manager? And then I became the tour manager. And I'm like, I'm the tour manager, but why am I not the manager? Right? I'm judging everyone else's decisions, and I'm struggling through it. And I remember there was one band that I toured with, Sugar Ray, and they were crazy partiers, and like in such a fun way. They were like, they're still really good friends of mine, and a couple of the members came to Megan and my wedding, and I just saw Mark at the festival the other day, and he's just a great friend and a great person. They're all great people that grew up in Newport Beach. But the bass player at the time, when we were all like raging, alcohol and drugs, like drinking gallons of vodka every day, like this is what we did. I was a stage manager and his bass tech. And he all of a sudden came to me one day and he had me put Jesus fish on his basses. He had gotten married. He had had his first kid, and he had had his come to Jesus moment. And I resented him so much for it. Right. Wow. Like I was like, oh, great. Now I can't party with my friend. Right. like it was all these things like, oh, great. Now he's this guy, and he's telling me about scripture, and he's talking about his church, and he's talking about worship music, and he's talking about these things. And I'm just like, oh, this is so lame. Right. Cause I didn't want to hear it. Yeah. And I think until you're ready to hear something, you're just going to spin it in whatever way you can. Yeah. And another time that God really showed up for me is I was working for I struggled with religion. I struggle with organized religion. I still do. I really struggle with organized religion. I have a huge problem with it. I have a problem with people thinking that they're leaders in that world instead of, the best leaders know how to follow the best. And that's really what it comes down to. And people get this like superiority complex where they feel like they're in charge of everyone. Yeah. Like, this is my congregation and I am their leader. And it's like, you're not their leader. Yeah. You're just the one that was appointed to help in Jesus's church. Yeah. And so I had a real problem with all the other religions. I went and tried them. I tried Buddhism, thought that was like, it was like, well, obviously look at how passive and amazing Buddha is. This must be it, right? This must be the path. And then I was on tour with this artist named A.R. Rahman, and he had done all the music for Slumdog Millionaire. So he's the biggest Bollywood artist in the world. And we're playing like stadiums. Yeah. And I took a job because I just needed to, after I was in between jobs. I had just gotten done working with Scott Weiland, and I needed something to fill in the time. Yeah. And so I went out with them and we were on tour, and I've got Hare Krishna beads on, and I'm doing the Hare Krishna prayer with these people, and I'm doing all of this stuff. Cool. And not only that, but the debauchery of just drinking massively and taking tons of pills. I had like my backpack sounded like a rattle, and I'm drinking every single day, and it was awful. And I'm, shaving my head into a mohawk because I'm just trying anything. Was it also bleached? I feel like it was bleached. Yeah, it was bleached. And I'm just trying anything to make myself feel like okay. Yeah. And I'm homesick and I don't want to be there. And I'm finding all the things they're doing wrong because I'd already been a tour manager, and I'm like, this tour sucks and you guys don't know what you're doing and this and that. And I'm out there, and we get to Detroit and we load into the Pontiac Silverdome. And we load everything in, and it's kind of a disaster. And I'm hearing that like the ticket sales aren't that great, and they're loading in and they're setting everything up. And mind you, this whole entire time, I think I'm a Hare Krishna, right? Like it's just so ridiculous. And I'm like doing it with all of these Indian people. There was 90 people from India on this tour. Oh. And so I'm thinking that this is like, obviously this is what I'm supposed to do. And we're loading in that morning, and everybody kind of goes to lunch, and I'm just loading in the band gear, my stuff, and I'm pushing a case, and the whole entire structure with like 250 moving lights and a video wall and all of these things above completely collapses on the stage with me on it. And there was a set piece that hit me in the head, and it hit me here. And if it would have hit me here, it would have killed me. So I was that far inches from dying, and it hit me and then knocked me underneath this catwalk bridge that was on stage, and I survived. And I ended up rolling off the stage and then going to the hospital. I had this crazy concussion. It was this whole ordeal. But I really think that like that was God looking after me, right? All the times that all the time that God has saved you. And we don't think of it that way because we're like, wow, what a lucky coincidence. Yeah. Oh, it was super lucky that I was just
wearing those bands.
Those beads, right? The beads, like, that's amazing. And like, I think that just looking back on life, there's so many times where I thought that it was like, even in my drug addiction, I really thought that it was the paramedics that saved me. Right. I was in a Bible study and we were talking about God's grace. And we were talking about, okay, so who wants to say the definition of God's grace? And they're like, well, it's God not giving you the punishment that you deserve. Right? And I'm like, that's powerful. It's powerful that God has so much grace that he doesn't give you the punishment that you deserve, because a lot of times the punishment we deserve is death. Yeah. And he saves us from that. Yeah. And so in my addiction, I overdosed and died twice. And when I was 19, 19 and 20, I think I overdosed and died twice. And the paramedics came, brought me back to life, put me in the hospital, woke up with handcuffed to the bed, that type of thing. Because the cops were like, what you did was illegal. I said, well, not really, because you can't find the drugs. And But I was looking back on that after I got sober, and I always thought that the paramedic saved my life. Oh, thank you, paramedic. You saved my life. But truly, it was God who saved me.
Yeah.
And decided that this story wasn't done yet.
Yeah.
And someone in the group said, well, you weren't a believer then. Was there anybody praying for you? And I'm like, yeah. You know what? I can guarantee I was an intravenous drug user at 19 years old, and I can guarantee my mother was praying for me every single day, because she is a believer. And I'm like, so that's the power of prayer, right?
Oh, yes.
The power of prayer is definitely a real thing.
Oh, it is very real. And you are keeping the streak going of every person who has been on this show to say that, because like I've said every time, people are just minimize it, downplay. Oh, you're going to pray for me? Cool. Yeah. Thanks for nothing. You're not doing anything. Somebody I love dearly, whenever I talk about praying, he's like, oh, so you were driving down the road and talking to nobody, or like talking to yourself. And I'm like, I'm praying for you too, my guy.
Yeah.
You just wait.
Just wait.
It's so powerful.
It's so powerful, and it makes such a difference.
Changes everything. We live in a spiritual world.
I didn't know how to pray when I got sober. It's like, this is so dumb. Thankfully, the program I was in had a bunch of prayers in there that would help me.
Yeah.
Jesus gives us a prayer.
Yeah.
To say, right?
Yeah. He's like, you don't know how to pray? Pray this.
Pray the Lord's Prayer. So that was one of the first ones I learned. And I learned it by heart, and I said it a lot. The Serenity Prayer. I use a lot. But I thought that praying, because the only type of praying I knew how to do was how to tell God what
you wanted.
I wanted. So I was basically praying. I was like, all right, God, do my will.
Yeah.
Right. That was my prayer. God, do my will. And if you don't do my will, I'm going to have this huge resentment against you and tell everyone that you're not real, because obviously you're not real, because I just asked for a bunch of stuff and you did none of it.
Yeah.
So that was my prayer every single time.
Yeah.
And it was sad.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people are stuck in that.
Yeah.
They're like, well, I prayed that so-and-so would be healed and they weren't healed. So how does God exist?
Yep.
And it's like, that's not, what I pray for. And Megan and I we're big on this at home, is what we pray for is strength. Like, God, please just give me the strength to get through whatever it is that you have in store for us, because it's not always going to be easy, but I need your help to be strong enough to get through this.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm not.
It's so good. Tell us about meeting Megan.
I met Megan in a sober meeting, and she was dating this other guy.
Megan.
It was amazing. And I talked to my sponsor, and I'm like, I really like her. And he's like, yeah, she's a serial dater. And I was like, okay. And so I'm going through like the beginnings of sobriety. So I'm going through these steps, and I'm crying every day, and I've, people are telling me that if I just say sober, God will give me a life beyond my wildest dreams, and that makes me cry. And I'm going through the wreckage of my past. And having to make a list of all of these things that I'm resentful against, which I find is actually like 5 pages of stuff from people from high school to the IRS to the creditors to the government to just everything, right? It's all in there. Every relationship I'd ever been in. I had this thing where I thought that I was like, I've never broken up with anyone. They've always broken up with me. So they're the bad people.
Oh, yeah.
But what I did was I made myself so unlikable that they had no choice. Right.
Yeah.
And so I met Megan, and she was like, do you tour? And I was like, no, I don't tour. And I was a tour manager, so it didn't really go over well. She was like, you're a tour manager, but you don't tour. And I'm like, well, they're a reggae band and they don't really tour that much. And so she canceled our first 3 dates. But she liked me and I liked her. And so.
Wait, did she cancel them because you lied to her?
She was canceled.
Or she was like, what's your deal?
She canceled them because she didn't want to date a guy that tours.
Okay.
Because she didn't think we were trustworthy.
I mean.
History tells you that the guys that tour are cheating on significant others.
Yeah.
You know, from like the 80s when you see those like the Motley Crue stage videos and stuff, right? That's just kind of what it is.
Behind the scenes with
behind the scenes. Things have obviously changed a lot now. You know, a lot of people on tour are sober, and there's a lot more family oriented and a lot less of the sex, drugs, and rock and roll that it used to be. So she finally agreed to go out with me. And so we're just kind of dating, and I had a call with her, and I called her and I was like, hey, look, I go, if we're going to date and we're going to try this, then we have to only date each other. I go, we can't date any other people or else we're not trying. And I go, and I'm not going to go through that because for me, I'll just find something else. Right.
Yeah.
And so she was like, wow, okay. She's like,
coming on a little strong there.
That's kind of a lot. And I'm like, all right.
I love her so much.
So we were out on a date, and I was like, I remember this specifically because I'm struggling. I had just gotten sober and I'm going through this program, and she's going through the same program. And I'm like, okay, well, I never knew how to get sober. So what did I do when I got sober? I did contrary action. I did everything that I used to do. I was trying to do things differently.
Yeah.
So I was taking time, and I'm like, I should take that same mindset and put it towards my relationship. And I go, because I told her on this date, I was like, hey, just so you know, every relationship I've ever been in has failed. And that's why I'm here right now, or else I wouldn't be here. But every one of them has failed. So obviously, I don't know how to be in a relationship, but I'm willing to learn.
Yeah.
So let's learn together. And that was I think that was our second date, which is coming on a little strong, right?
Yeah.
But
I mean, at this point,
I'm like 40 years old. Yeah.
Come on. Like
this is it.
What's the point of not this?
It's just, I was just more like, let's just be direct and real. And so we did, we read through so many books together in our early relationship. Like that's what we used to do. We'd go on drives to go see our parents in Flagstaff, and we'd read books the whole way.
No.
And we'd read we read the Love Languages book.
It's a good one.
Right. Which is really good. We read the Love and Respect, which is a really good one about how the guys need respect and the women need love. And a lot of times we confuse those two things. And so that was a really good one.
Yeah.
And we just read books about being in a relationship.
Yeah.
And what that entailed. And we didn't date for very long. I'm in my 40s and I'd never been married. And we didn't date for very long. We dated for about a year and a half before I asked her to marry me. And that was on 4th of July, 2019. Aww. And then she was like, oh, she said yes, and we were happy. And
or was she like, it's a little soon, don't you think?
She was actually all for it. And
I love that.
She was all for it. And it was great. And
she's the best.
And we started taking this Seriously Dating and Engaged class at our church, which was something I would never do. Yeah. And I suggest it to people now, some friends of mine. I'm like, hey, you guys, you guys should take this Seriously Dating and Engaged class. And most of the women go, oh, he would never do that. Oh. And I'm like, what do you mean he would never do that? Has he been so successful at all of his relationships? He doesn't think he needs to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that was my thought is I'm not very good at this.
Yeah.
Like we only learn how to be in relationships from what we see. Right. So we see our friends or we see our parents or we see whoever. And my parents have been married for a really long time, but I don't know the intricacies of how they've stayed together that long. Yeah. I just see this. I just see what's on the outside.
Yeah.
So I'm comparing my insides to everyone else's outsides. Yeah. And I'm failing.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, well, let's just dive into it and be vulnerable and go through this. So I would go meet her. She played in worship bands.
Yeah.
And I didn't go to church at the time before when we were just dating in 2018, I didn't go to church. I went to that Celebrate Recovery at Saddleback, which was this giant church. And every once in a while I'd go on Sunday and it would be like church on a screen.
Oh,
right.
Very impersonal. Yeah.
Very impersonal. Church on a screen. And then some pastor would come out and talk to everybody afterwards. And you'd be like, why do I need to hear this guy just give a sermon? And I would go meet Megan. I just wanted to hang out with her.
Yeah.
I'd be like, when can we hang out again? And she's like, well, I'm really busy. I've got work and I work all day. And she's like, you don't understand. You just tour. And then when you're home, you've got nothing but time.
Yeah.
You go to meetings in the morning and then go to the gym.
Yeah.
She's like, you don't get it. And I'm like, okay, when can we hang out again? She goes, well, Sunday morning, I am playing at the church. And I'm like, okay, I'll come there. And then we'll go have coffee afterwards. So I would go to the church, this church in a box. It was at some auditorium, and I would watch her play, and I'm like bawling from these songs, right? Like it's creating this connection with Jesus that I never thought that I could have. And so I'm watching her play, and I'm listening to these songs that I've never heard. Like everyone I talk to now has heard all these songs. Like I remember going to lead with Jason one day, and he goes, Derek, we're just going to play the Christian standards. And I go, there are no Christian standards for me. Yeah. They're all new. Like, yeah. I literally heard, oh, come to the altar. And it was the first time I heard it.
Yeah.
Like 5 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
So like, I've never heard these things, and I'm listening to these, and I'm just like, it brings on so much emotion. And I'm thinking back, and I'm like, God, when has music is so much to me. I didn't realize that music could be something that could do this.
Yeah.
And that could help. And when it's written in a way that is biblically accurate and not just put there to bring on emotion, then I think it makes a lot of sense. And I love worship music.
Yeah.
And I love it when it's pure.
Dude, how freaking kind of the Lord to use your first love of music to bring you closer to him.
Crazy.
Like, it's literally like, I feel like I could burst inside. Like, I feel like it's like you started this conversation. Oh, I'm tearing up. You started this conversation with your love for music. And then he tied it all together with this beautiful bow of your love for music and the love of your life, who was your future wife, and meeting you there in the midst of that. And he's like, this is what I've always had for you.
Always. Crazy, right?
He's so good.
So crazy.
He's so good.
Yeah. It's amazing how it works. My mom used to tell me, like, you should play worship songs. And I'm like, give me a break. Those guys don't get laid. Right? Like, that's not fun. Like, when's the last time the worship guy was like, had his foot up on the monitor and was rocking out? Like, it just doesn't. And so I was like, it wasn't happening. And I remember leading at church with my mom there. It was very emotional. Like, just for that full circle of her, like, telling me all along, like, you should be using your musical ability for
Moms
something.
always know.
They always know. They do. And I was like, and I'm going, nope, that's not happening. And then Megan and I started playing in worship bands together, which was amazing. After we got married, we started playing in worship bands together, which was incredible. And then we moved to Franklin, moved to Tennessee, because we didn't feel like the family and Jesus was, and the church and all of those things were as prevalent in California where we were. Yeah. There's a lot of like, look at what I built, look at what I did. Yeah. Instead of look at what he did, look at what he built, and look at what he's done for me, and look at how gracious he is in my life. With all the mistakes I've made, he still loves me and still does this for me. Yeah. And that's kind of the way we live, right? Yeah. Like, for me, it's look at all the mistakes I've made in my life. Look at all the harm I've caused and all the things I've done. And he still lets me have this life. Yeah. And that's amazing.
He still tied it together with that pretty little bow.
That's it every time. And I'm in awe of it every time.
Yeah.
And it wasn't anything I expected. You know, when I got sober, they told me, they were like, just stay sober and continue to improve your conscious contact with God, and you will have a life beyond your wildest dreams. And I remember I used to sit in the parking lot, like with 60 days sobriety, and I would just cry, be like, life beyond my wildest dreams.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know, I got some pretty big dreams, you know, and I'm thinking like, this is it. I'm going to be a rock star. I'm finally going to get everything that I always wanted. I'm finally going to have all of that. And God had different plans, which turned out the reason it was beyond my wildest dreams was because I was something I never dreamed about, because it was so much better. It was so much better than anything I could have thought of. And I ended up with an amazing, beautiful wife that loves Jesus and loves to play worship music, and 2 beautiful daughters. And I'm living in Tennessee, in Spring Hill, Tennessee, where thankfully there's more churches than coffee shops right now.
The coffee shops are catching up.
They're catching up really quickly, which is terrifying.
And the coffee shops are turning into churches, and churches into coffee shops.
It's crazy. But it's just, it's just nice. And it's nice to be around people. Like, when you meet people, one of their first questions is, oh, what church do you go to?
Yeah.
And we didn't do that in California. In California, that was not one of the first things that you brought up to people. Yeah. Wasn't what church you go to.
Yeah.
So it's nice for us to be here and to feel like we have a sense of community. And that's really important to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
good. Okay. So just for fun, can you tell me a few hilarious top moments from tour life, band life, Blink-182, just good old memories?
Well, with Blink, we were kids, right? So
you were like
when I toured with Blink, I was 21 years old. 21, so when I toured, like Megan calls us the Lost Boys, like from Peter Pan, because we just never grow up. Because we literally have everything given, like that. We have everything taken care of for us.
Sure. I mean, I felt that when I saw Blink. I'm like, are they still the same age I was when I listened to them?
They are.
I love it.
They're my age.
I kind of love it, though.
And we'd go fly on planes, right? To go to places. I remember we flew I think we flew 40 times in 30 days one time. It was a lot because they, Damn It and Josie had gotten really big from their album Do Ranch. And so we were traveling around, and when we would travel, no one was safe on the plane. None of us. Right. So we would wait. And as soon as somebody would wear like khaki pants on the plane, like khaki Dickies, because that's what we wore, Dickies.
Sure, yeah.
Right before we were about to land, we would pour water on their lap. So it looked like they peed their pants. So they'd have to walk out. And then Tom would always fall asleep next to the window. And so Mark and I got a bunch of gay porno cards. And we taped them up all around him. And then with this sign that said, I'm gay.
Oh man. He was so lucky that iPhones weren't a thing then.
They were not a thing then, but it was fun. We were having so much fun just being kids, and we're traveling around, and it wasn't an ego thing. We were just being dumb kids.
Yeah.
I remember a flight that I was on. We had flown back to Los Angeles, and I lived with Mark in San Diego, and Mark and I were sitting on the plane, and our tour manager at the time, this guy, Jeff Moss, was on there, and we had to get on this smaller commuter plane to fly to San Diego, like right after we landed in LA. And it was like the end of this tour that we had done. And we get on, and everything's always just jokes and dick jokes, and just it's all hilarious.
Even their concerts.
The content. But the cool thing is that's really the way it is. Mm-hmm. So it's not like they're just getting up there and playing some act.
Yeah. That's just the way they are. It's very believable.
And it was hilarious. And so Mark and I were on the plane, and Mark goes to the back of the plane and sits in this seat, and the stewardess is doing her whole thing, and he keeps going like this. And she's all, "Sir, I need you to stop doing that." And he goes, And he keeps doing it, right? And he keeps doing it. They kicked us off the plane. Well, they kicked him off the plane. And I'm like, and I look at our tour manager and I'm like, I'm going too. I'm not going to let him go by himself. And so just making jokes like that, like people just didn't understand what we were doing.
Yeah.
And so I look back on the stories with them and like, we had so much fun together as kids. Yeah. We had fun together in that time. And I don't think that you can ever go back to that.
Yeah.
Right. So where they are now and what they're doing, I'm super happy for them, and what I'm doing, I'm perfectly happy in what I do. But having those memories of that time is super cool. And when I manage younger bands now, I hope they're having those times too.
Yeah.
And I don't get mad at them for it.
Yeah.
I'm like, go have your fun. Do your thing.
Look at the grace God gave you. For real. And it's just like he's used all of it.
Yeah.
It's so good.
And I've been in some, in some crazy situations too. I think I think it's okay to talk about it now because it's been so long. I was with Sugar Ray and we went and we played a show. Got this opportunity to play in Jamaica for this very prominent person's private birthday party. Mm-hmm. And they rented out the whole entire resort. And they had like us and 5 other very large bands playing here. And the only people that were there, and this is my debauchery loving life and it not working out well. The only people there were 50 Russian models, 100 strippers, and 100 porn stars.
Oh my God.
Other than that, it's just us band members.
And the people you're playing for?
And the people
or the like
for him and his friends, because it was his birthday party. And we show up and they pick us up and we each have a model that takes us to our room with a glass of champagne. And there's as much drugs as you want, as much everything as you want. And
why does that make me so sad?
I honestly, truthfully speaking, I did not end up hooking up with anyone that whole entire weekend because I was so messed up on drugs that nothing happened. But it was crazy. They'd be like first, 40 girls naked into the pool get $1,000 a piece. And then naked foam party.
This sounds like a wild dream that you had.
It sounds like a wild dream. And then we left that and we flew to Oshkosh, Wisconsin in the middle of winter and we started our tour. And it was like 10 below.
What in the world?
Yeah. So
the whiplash you probably experienced.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
One flight.
I've been through a lot of those things and it's just like, I would never want to go back and do them again.
Yeah.
But I think God sends you on a journey of you're supposed to experience all of these things.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times I go, man, one of the things I always say is, God, why couldn't I have gotten sober earlier? Why didn't I figure this out earlier? Mm-hmm. Why didn't life is so good now. Why didn't I figure this out earlier? And I think that God needs your story, right? He needs your story. So it didn't happen earlier because God needed my story. He had a plan. He has a plan for everybody. Mm-hmm. And everything happens exactly the time it's supposed to happen. When tragic things happen in people's lives, I believe, incredible loss, cancer, all of these things that are affecting people is, these things affect people not because they're bad people. They affect people because he needs your story. Mm. He needs you to go out and be able to tell that story and to be able to help other people. Mm. Right? That's the story of redemption.
Yeah. And the nature of a fallen world.
Always.
Where we can't escape it anyway. So he's going to use it.
Absolutely. He's going to use it all.
Yeah. Not to mention, he's a good, gracious God who allows us to make our own choices.
Which is amazing.
It's so good. It's so good. And it is heartbreaking when people are like, well, why does God let bad stuff happen? I'm like, oh, there's so much more than that. Like, he didn't want bad stuff to happen. We let that in the world. Humans did that.
I heard this rad story that like just changed my mind. And it was this, there was a pastor and he went in to get a haircut and the guy was a non-believer, the guy cutting his hair. And The pastor walks into the barber and he sits down, and the barber's a non-believer, and he's talking to him, and he's like, I just don't believe in God.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all these bad things happen to all of these people. So how can God be real?
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, well, you know, I guess that's the way you feel. So the guy finishes cutting his hair, and he comes out and he shows him, and there's this homeless guy sitting there, and he's super bushy hair and big beard,
Mm-hmm.
bushy hair. And he goes, see that homeless guy right there? He goes, how can there be barbers if his hair is so bushy and his hair is so long? And he goes, well, he never came to see me.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, that's right. He never came to see you. And it's the same thing with God, right? It's all of these people. It's like all of this stuff happens, and it's like you never turn to him.
Yeah.
You never asked him.
Yeah. That's so good. He's not pushy. He's not that. He will pursue you, but he's not gonna force himself on you.
Right.
That's so good. It's so good. I like that. That's a great ending. Dude, thank you so much for coming.
Absolutely.
Being here
Thanks for having
today
me.
and sharing and just being you and like letting Jesus just shine through it all.
Thank you so much.
It's the best. I'm so glad you're my friend.
Me too.
Thank you. All right, Derek, thank you so much for being with us today. How can people get in touch with you?
They can find me online on social media.
The internet.
You
can find Derek Gordon on the internet.
Yeah, on the World Wide Web, as us old timers call it.
At AOL.com.
Yeah. You should dial up. Check it out.
Yeah. What's your handle? Derek
DBH.
Derek DBH. Give him a follow, learn about his awesome wife and family and all the good things. So thank y'all for being here with us today. As always, if you have any questions or comments or want to reach out for anything, you can contact us at SUP, that's SUP, SUP at stuffgodneversaid.com. And we will see you next time.